In this lecture, I am going to show you how to write your lab report number 1. Okay, now you start with writing the abstract. Now, as we said before, the abstract is like the preview of the movie. So you want to first talk about the goal of the study. Okay, and the goal of the study is really just to trying to see whether or not the validity of the pre-Q can really have an effect on attention, which is being measured by the reaction time, how fast you react to something, right? And then you want to describe the general methods used in the current study. And you're probably thinking, well, what is the general method? I mean, what do you mean by general method? I mean, aren't we gonna write about the methods later? Okay, so the general method is something you summarize very briefly what the method that we use for the current study, and so the general method, you want to say something like we use the site toolkit and online experimental paradigm to study the study. That's it. Okay, and then you want to talk about the general results and the findings. All right, so you don't want to talk about the very specific results, such as in the validity conditions, what in the invalid conditions, how many milliseconds it took, and that's too specific. Okay, so you want to go general. So the general results, you want to go say something like, in general, the validity of the Q affected the reaction time, in which that the reaction time for the valid Q was shorter compared to the invalid Qs. Okay, so that's it. So what now? And the last one, you want to talk about what the results imply. Well, the results obviously imply that the validity of the Q has an effect on the reaction time, and which means that it has a way of influencing our attention. That's it. That's all you need to write. Now, generally in a research paper like this, you need to write starting from the introduction. But since this is your first lab, you don't need to write the introduction lab. But you'll see that from your second and your third lab, you will need to write a full introduction. Okay, so we will get there I'll tell you more about it when we get there. Okay? But for this lab, you don't have to write any introduction. Okay, so the methods part, so you start writing about what the participants, so who participated in the study. So in this case, that the participants would be you guys, the students, okay? And then I am assuming that everybody has normal and corrected to normal vision, okay? And then the number of people who participated in the study were 22. And then the male and female ratios is the male, there were 5 of you guys, and then the female, there were 17 of you. And the age range, okay, I am going by a very broad age range. Okay, so I'm just gonna write 19 to 50. Okay, and then you'll see that the participants are not compensated for their time because it fulfills the requirement of a college course, which is your experimental psychology course. And then the next thing you want to talk about is the material and apparatus. Okay, and then so you want to kind of fill in and say what is the computer. So if you use a Dell computer, you use a Dell computer. If you use a Sony, then you want to say you use a Sony. If you use an Apple AirBook Pro Mac, whatever it is, you just want to say that. Okay, and then one thing that's really important is you want to say what the monitor size was. Okay, and then next thing you want to say that what is the actual address for the web page. So that would be www.sitetoolkit.org, and that is the online demonstration system for experimental psychology courses. Okay, the next thing you want to talk about is the overview and design of the current study. Okay, so the independent variable in this case is going to be the validity of the Q, and the dependent variable of the case, in this case, the dependent variable is going to be the reaction time. Okay, and we'll talk about how the reaction time is actually defined. But essentially, the reaction time is when the stimulus the go stimulus appear until the time you actually um, touch the button. Okay. Okay, and design. So this design is going to be a true experiment, and then this is a repeated measure design. All right. Now, how many trials, blocks, conditions, etc. Were there? Okay, we'll go over that next when we talk about the procedures. Okay, and the order. So something I want to talk about. The order of the presentation is randomized by computer, so you can just copy that word for word. Okay, so now let's talk about what the procedure is. All right, so the procedure after the program started, what did you see? Okay, now this is what you guys actually saw. Okay, you saw that press space to begin, and after you press space, then you're supposed to look for something called the target go. Okay, and then so if the target appear on the left box, then you should hit A on the keyboard, and if the target appear on the right box, the participants, that would be you, should hit the L on the keyboard, right? And then, so this would be an example. So you're supposed to pay attention to this, and as soon as this go signal came abroad, and then you're supposed to, well, basically hit L in this case, right? Now, this would be something that is like a valid trial. So this is a valid trial, okay? Now, if it blink on the right, but instead the go, well, in this case, the X showed on the left, then this is an invalid trial. And this happened about 25% of the time. So your assumption is to always make kind of think that, okay, the next one is going to be a valid trial. And so the invalid trial, when it happens 1 out of 4 times, it should be more like a shock to you, okay, rather than something that you're expecting. Okay, now the trial timeline basically looked like this. Okay, so you have the trial that starts, and then followed by the visual stimulus, and then you have the pre-queue that blinks, so it can be either a valid trial or the invalid trial, which is why over here it says V or I. And then the target appears. Target will be the go signal, okay? And then from the moment that the target appears, the reaction time is recorded per trial, okay? And then so the reaction time is defined by the moment that your target appears to the moment that you press the key, that when you make a decision, okay? And the moment that you make a decision, that's when your trial ends. And then after the trial ends, it goes back to the beginning of the next trial, and that's what the arrow is standing for, okay? Now you should write this, you should try to describe this figure in written words. Now don't give me this figure as like a figure in your lab report. I won't take it. You will actually get a bunch of points taken off if you do that. Okay, please don't do that. So try to really put this out in a written format instead. Okay, that's the whole point of the exercise, to see if you can describe something really well. Okay, now there were 100 trials there, and 75 trials were valid pre-queues, and 25 trials were invalid pre-queues. Okay, and now the computer will only count the reaction time from the correct trial. So remember the ones that you took too long to respond, or the ones that the target appear on the right but you hit left instead. Okay, or vice versa. So that would be an incorrect response. None of the incorrect response actually gets recorded. Okay, but only the ones that are correct count toward the reaction time. Okay, so in other words, you can see that there are 100 trials and 75% of them were valid trials and 25% of them were invalid trials. Now, for all of the conditions combined, 50% of the target appear on the left and 50% of the target appear on the right. And the order of the presentation is randomized by the computer. Okay, so that's all you need to write for the method. Okay. Now let me see if there's anything else that I missed out. Okay, so what were the participants instructed to do? Well, you were instructed to hit left, to hit A if the target appear on the left, and hit L if the target appear on the right. And in terms of the task, what was operational defined as valid or invalid? Okay, so valid trial is operational defined as the queue and the target appears on the same side on a consistent basis on a consistent side. Now, if the queue and the pre-queue and the actual target appear on the opposite side, that would be an invalid trial. Okay. And the last thing you want to talk about what statistical tests were used to calculate the gathered data. And then I'll tell you right here, that would be the pair t-test. Okay, so definitely have that in your last thing in your methods. Now, the data for your lab number one are going to be posted on Blackboard under lab number one folder in your first week module content, okay? Okay, now if you were to go to your lab number one data, you can actually download this, okay, and you will see the actual Excel over here. Okay, and when you open this, you'll see that these are the actual data. Okay, now, so we need to calculate this first. Okay, so let's calculate out their average, the standard error of the mean, okay, and of course the standard deviation as well. And then I'm going to throw in the number of the people in there just in case. Okay, so calculate out the average equals average. You guys know how you guys learn how to do this in stats lab, so I'm not gonna go over it. So you press this, and then the standard deviation, you do exactly the same thing, and then close parentheses, hit enter. There you go. Number of n is count, left parentheses, highlight all of the numbers, close the parentheses, hit enter, so it should give you 22. Standard error of the mean is equals standard deviation divided by square root of the number of people in your group, so that would be 22. Okay, and then hit enter, and now you calculate out all of your average and standard deviation and standard error of the mean for one of the conditions, and now you just copy and paste, and that's it. Okay. All right, now let's perform a t-test on this. Well, how do you perform a t-test? Well, in order to perform a t-test, well, you can do this classically the way that you guys learn how to do it on SPSS, but Excel actually also has a way to do that for you. Okay, and there are two ways of doing it. I'm going to show you the easy way first. So I'm going to write here t-test, okay? And then, so you just hit enter and you literally type in t-test, parentheses. Now it's going to give you some arguments that what's the first array, second array, how many tails, and what's the type, okay? So array would be this. So that would be your first array. And when you highlight that, you just hit comma, and then you enter your second array, which is here, and then hit comma again. Now it's gonna ask you if you want a one-tailed distribution or two-tailed distribution. You always pick the two-tailed distribution, okay? Comma, and then the next thing we want to say is that we want it paired because each person got two numbers, right? Because remember when you were doing the actual experiment, you were given two numbers, one for the valid trial and another one for the invalid trial. So this one person got two numbers. It's not one person that getting one number. Okay, so this is a paired t-test. Okay, now when you enter, well, okay, I see what I did. Okay, so one distribution, okay, so that would be two, and then over here, paired. Yeah. Okay. Now this is giving you a very small number. So it essentially this number means move the decimal points 10 times to the left. So that means that there are 9 zeros in front of you. So this is a very significant effect. It's a well, definitely a lot less compared to 0.05. Okay, so this number that they're giving you is actually the p-value. Okay, but you'll see that what this is doing is it's not giving you the actual t value. So that's not good enough, all right, for your lab report. So what can we do? Well, you can go to this thing that says data, go to data analysis, okay, and then you want to go down here and say, I want to perform a t-test paired to sample for means. Okay, click OK. Okay, variable one range. So you do this exactly like you did it in the previous one. Okay, that's your first one. And your variable two range is this one. Okay. And I think you can just leave this in here. Output range. Let me see. Where is it? Output range. Oh yeah, so we'll put the output range here. I think that's it. Let's click enter. Yep, that's it. So over here, it tells you exactly what you need to know. Let's see. Okay, so the mean, the variance, observations, it gives you the degree of freedom, and then it gives you the t statistic. This is the one that we are really looking for. Okay. Okay, so this is the one that we are looking for. So you can see that this is a negative 11.57, well actually 11.58 if you round it to the hundredths place. All right, and now the number here, 1.4 e minus 10, yeah, so this is exactly the same number as here, so we did it right. Okay, so this is how you would actually do it. Now, what would you actually write? Well, that we'll cover that in the next few slides. But essentially, what you want to write is going to be T parentheses 21, that's the degree of freedom, equals this number, the stat, the T stat. So negative 11.58. Okay, comma, this number, p is less than 0.05. That's it. That's all you need to report for reporting the inferential statistics. Okay. Okay, now we are done with this part, and the next thing we need to do is make a graph for your figure number one. So how do we do that? Okay, so you need to highlight, well, actually it's probably easier to have something like a small table here. And then over here, it says valid trials and invalid trials. Okay, just gonna add a little column here. Okay, and then over here you have your average, and over here you have your standard error, the mean. Okay, and now we're just gonna copy this number. Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna copy this number over here. I'm going to copy them by value. And then you do exactly the same thing for the SEM. Okay, right click and then paste special, copy by value. There you go. Okay, now what you need to do next, if you remember from your statistics lab, you need to go to this. And then you need to highlight valid, invalid, and then the number of the average, and then hit this thing, 2D column. Okay. Right, so this looks pretty good. And then what you need to do is get rid of the grid lines and then format the axis here and make the line appear. Okay, and then also do exactly the same thing for your x-axis. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, okay, we're good. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is we need to actually, hold on a second, not data, but okay, let's change the chart name first. Okay, so that would be validity of the trial on reaction time. Okay, so probably want to add something like effect of validity of the trials, validity trials, or we can just say trial validity. Okay, on reaction time. Okay. Now, are we done yet? What are we missing? Well, we're not done yet. We need to add the chart element. So because what does the x-axis say and what does the y-axis say? So you need to put them in. So we're gonna add the horizontal title and then we're gonna add the vertical title, okay? So the axis title should be what you probably already thought, trial validity, with validity of trial, whichever you pick, that's fine. And down here, what you want to write is, well, first of all, what is this? This is reaction time, right? So reaction time, now a lot of people don't write what the unit is. So make sure you have that because what does 300 or 400, 500 mean? I mean, is that 300 years? Is it 300 days? 300 seconds? And what is that? So these are 300 milliseconds. So you want to write in ms, or if you really want, you can actually write them in milliseconds. Okay. Now let's just change this to make it look a little nicer, in which way that there are tick marks here, major type. So I'm just gonna put them inside and then also going to change the number a little bit because I think 100 will probably make it look better. Yep. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Okay, now are we done with everything? We are actually not yet, okay? There is something that is missing, and let me ask you guys a question. Why do we calculate out the SEM? That's because we need error bars, right? So to add the error bars, you want to highlight the bars and then click on this thing and then click the error bars and push on this arrow over here and then go to more options. Now this is going to pop down. You scroll down to custom and specify value and you want to tell the computer what you want the positive value to be, and that would be your SEM. And then to do this again for the negative value, and click OK, and voila, there is your figure. Now that just makes this slightly prettier because this it's because the line is not very, doesn't look very appealing. Okay, so maybe make this a bold. This, I'm gonna make this bold also, and then make this bold, and then make this bold. Okay, and the error bar is kind of hard to see, so I'm gonna make this a little thicker, maybe like 1.5. And then the same thing with this, I'm gonna make it 1.5, and then this bar over here also. Okay, now you can see it much better. And then now the font is a little bit small, so I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger also. Let's say 16, and then make this maybe like 14, and then make this 14, and make this maybe like 16. Okay, see, now that looks pretty good. And now I'm just gonna make this also bold, and then 16. So whatever you do, usually your title should look a little bit bigger than the rest of the fonts, but this looks pretty good. All right, so this, you will need to copy this and paste it onto your Word document when you are writing your lab report number 1. Okay, that's it. And now the only thing that you need to do is go find this exact file and just do and follow along what I just did here, and then you should be fine. Okay, so you want to talk about what the descriptive stats are. So you want to put in all the descriptive stats in mean, standard deviation in a table, and refer to it in the text of the results section. And also report the actual numbers of the mean and standard deviation in the text. And then don't forget the units, and that would be the milliseconds. Okay, and definitely refer to as table 1. You can look at the model paper and see how they do this. This person did a really good job in referring and actually writing what the results section should look like. Okay, and now the results, the second part, you want to talk about the brief statement that the paired t-test was used, and then you make sure you want to report the inferential statistics and the results of the t-test. So this is something that's very similar to your statistics lab that you have to do. Okay, I just want to kind of make sure that you already know how to do it. Now, how do you report the inferential statistics in the APA stat? Well, first you need to calculate the data. So you want to figure out the t-test value, okay? And then you make a decision whether the p-value is significant or not. And then you report the stats with a sentence. So you do this exactly the same way that you had to do on your statistics lab, in which you have to interpret the data, okay? Now, the sentence should be in the context of whether the independent variable had a significant effect on the dependent variable or not. So the sample sentence is something like this. The results of a paired t-test strongly reflected that there is a significant effect of the amount of coffee consumed on the score received on the intentional test. So in this case, in your lab number 1, it should be something like the results of a paired t-test strongly reflected that there is a significant effect of the validity of the Q on the reaction time. Okay, and then you write something like this in the APA style, which you all have to do. Okay. And just in case you don't remember what that green part in the previous slide means, well, that the description is this. You want to write the T and then followed by the degree of the freedom, and then you want to say what is the T value that is obtained, and comma, and followed by the p-value of either is this greater than or less than 0.05. Now, your results section should only have one paragraph for this lab. So the first sentence should be about the descriptive statistics, so the mean and the standard deviation. And the second sentence is the inferential statistics of the main effect. And that would be the t-test value and p-values. Now, for this lab, you will need to generate one figure and one table. And so the effect of the pre-queuing validity on reaction time. Okay. Now, the miscellaneous, you when you look at the model paper, you'll see that there is a cover page, there is running head, there's a page number, figure caption, table, figures, or author note page. So all of these are on the template. So just see if you can just change that is appropriate to this lab. Okay. And I just want to talk about the figure captions page. So the figure captions page is basically a way to tell the reader how to read your figure, basically. Okay. So you want to say in each figure, kind of tell the reader what is the x-axis and what is the y-axis. Okay. And then you want to tell the reader what the error bars are representing. Okay, and in this case, you want to use the standard error of the mean. It's very similar to what you guys did for your statistics laboratory. Okay.